Yo, hello everybody, Mike here, baseball collector. Happy Monday to everybody. Today should be a fun video. This will be an interesting discussion, and I'm going to be interested to see how you guys respond to what I'm about to talk about. And the title is going to be insanely clickbaity on purpose. First, let me say thank you to 4 collectors. Last night I was on with Dylan and Chris and Theo debating the merits of the 48 through 55 Bowman sets and which ones designs we liked and star power and back design and all the things. And at the end of the day, all vintage cards are awesome. I will say that, but you still have favorites. You still have designs you prefer and designs you don't like. I want them all. So at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter, but it's just a fun debate and fun thing to discuss. So thanks for that. Stay tuned tomorrow. I'm hoping tomorrow, Chris and I will have our first Showcase Showdown. It'll be a special preview episode tomorrow where we spin the wheel for the first time. We're going to talk about our new format for this season, and we're going to get rolling with Showcase Showdown for your viewing pleasure. So stay tuned for that. The main point of this, and I do have a couple cards to show off that I will turn the camera around in a minute. The main point of this video is to talk about the grading standards and how they've changed and then does it matter. I watched a video, I think it was last week, and I can't remember the guy. I wish I knew it, but it was good. He had a bunch of vintage cards that he had gotten from a collection that were crispy, beautiful, sent them in and got largely grades that he was disappointed in, thought they were much higher. And then he took those and bought the same card, and he did this on a lot of cards, so it was an incredibly fascinating experiment. But he bought the same card in a old PSA slab with an old flip, old serial number, meaning it was graded at some point in the near or distant past, in the last, past 3 years ago, let's say, and bought them in higher grades and regraded them, like cracked them all out, sent them back in to see how much they would change under today's grading standards compared to what they would have been graded under the old grading standards. And it was significant. Some cards, very few were the same. Most of them were at least a grade, most of the time 2 grades lower, sometimes even 3 grades lower, going from one PSA slab that was graded a long time ago to the current grading. And you say, well, that's not fair, that's not cool, that's not, all of which are not an unfair thing to say those things. And yet, so what is going to be how I respond. Like, the first thing we need to ask is, why did PSA change their grading standards? And the answer is because they can. I've said this, if I've said it once, I've said it 100 times. If you think PSA or Fanatics or any of them care about us, you are wrong. And I'm a PSA guy. I like PSA. I like SGC too. I like the company a lot. I prefer the PSA slabs. I prefer the continuity in my collection. I've discussed that ad nauseum. So I'm going to say all this and still say that I'm going to buy a PSA slab today and tomorrow and the next day and the next day. And I'll still grade with PSA. So that's the caveat to all of what I'm about to say. That this doesn't change my mind about using them as a service. And I'll save that for the end as to why. But why did PSA change their grading standards? Because they can. And essentially they've gotten better at grading. That would be and when I say, people are going to laugh, they're going to throw their, whatever they're drinking at the screen right now and say they're worse at grading. They're more inconsistent at grading. There's, kids that have been out of high school for a week grading cards and all the things that are thrown out there, all of which might be true. But I don't think that we think the human element, whereas it used to be the human element was 100% of the equation, Now, the computer AI element is a bigger part of the equation. And so centering is going to be scrutinized significantly more because it's done by computer. Detecting minute wrinkles and creases is going to be even, they're more astute at that. They have better technology to detect those things. So a perfect card truly has to be a perfect card. And that doesn't mean about eye appeal. This is technical grade we're talking about. And so eye appeal can be much different than the technical grade on the card. I have plenty of cards in my collection that look great that might be technically numerically graded low. And so that's always been true, by the way. That's not new. But I think that the high eye appeal, low grade has become more prevalent because instead of just getting either the eye appeal grade, which is different than the technical grade, right? There is a difference. And I think they used to grade on eye appeal. I think when it was the human element involved, you had a lot more, man, this just looks really great. Yeah, there's this, or I can't detect that, or whatever issue there might be with the card on a technical basis. They would just give the card a grade that makes the most sense. And I want them to grade the card on a technical basis. And so centering, edges, surface, right? All those things, corners. Is there a crease, not a crease? Wrinkle, not a wrinkle? Pinhole, not a pinhole? All those things. So I just think they've gotten better at detecting flaws in cards. Does that mean they're better? I said earlier they're better at grading. They're better at detecting flaws. That's probably a more accurate way to say that. So you say, well, that sucks. The grading standards change. Things change all the time. Like in life, nothing stays the same. If we expected PSA's grading standards to stay consistent throughout their history, that's just naive. And they're going to change. As they can change, they will change. And they will continue to change. That is not something that, okay, now we have these new grading standards, that's going to be normal forever. That's not true either. There will be some enhancement or some advancement, some technology breakthrough that allows them to do an even more thorough job of grading a card. And so, but I do hear the consistency issue. Well, that's not consistent. Yeah. I don't have I'm not arguing for or against any point. I'm just trying to discuss this out, truly. But what it affects and what this guy was talking about is now you've got old cards that are graded 8s that really would be 5s today, let's say. And these people are using them for the set registry and all of that. And I would say that who cares? Like, that's just silliness. And if you care about that, if you want an 8 that really looks like a 5 and you just want it because it says 8 on it, great. I want the 5 that looks like an 8. You know what I mean? That's the card that I want to go for. And I do think there is a disparity in the way the hobby views newer graded cards versus older cards. And this is really mainly in the vintage world because ultra modern is all new anyway. But when you're looking at vintage cards and you're thinking about, well, this was graded, long ago at this certain standard, and it received a great grade, and then today's standard would receive this grade. I have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of cards that would not get the same grade today as they did back in the day. Does that mean I shouldn't collect them or have them? Like, oh, well, these aren't graded, under today's standards, so they're flawed cards or they're not as good of cards, and you send them back in and have them regrade it and see how you feel. And I'm just glad I have the card. And I think I have nice copies of those cards. Are some of them overgraded? Of course. Are some of my newer submissions undergraded in my opinion? Yes, of course. But that would have been true whether they've changed the standards or not. It's just gotten worse. It's just made it even more prevalent. It just happens more often. So does it affect the set registry? Yeah, probably. Should any of us lose a wink of sleep over that? No, I don't. Why? Why should you let that bother you and affect your hobby? I do love how, I think John Mangini says it, I only worry about things that really affect my hobby, and I'm not really worried about, I'm telling you, I don't care whether they change their standards or not. I could give two flips whether or not they change their standards. Because I'm still going to buy the nicest looking card that I can, and the grade is what the grade is. The technical grade is what the technical grade is. I want a nice looking card to fill a hole in my collection. And hopefully that's an attitude that is just becoming, I think the eye appeal game and all of that is becoming more just a bigger deal in the hobby. People care about that more, and you should want a nice looking card. And I want people to look at my cards and go, man, that looks really great for the grade. Like if all of my cards, if that's the, response that someone would get holding it, and I'm a big hold it at arm's length guy and tell me what you think. Not, stick it under a loop and a microscope and, examine every little bit of it. I'll find flaws in dang near every vintage card. Give me a break. But arm's length, when I'm just looking at this card, enjoying the card for what it is, that's the standard I use. Does it look nice? And if it's off center, I know it's off center. If it's got rough corners, I know it's got rough corners. Those things are, each collector has to decide what flaws or imperfections they're willing to live with for cards in their collection. I'm a guy that can't stand creases across the face or that are just very distracting. Paper loss on the back, great. Paper loss on the front, less enthusiastic about that because it's kind of like a crease to me. But some people don't care. They buy creased cards and all that. I buy creased cards if it's not right in the middle of the card or affecting the picture, because I'm a registration guy. That's the most important thing to me, which is the picture. The image on the card is the most important thing to me, because that's what it's trying to do. If it's miscut or off center, it came out of the factory that way. So I have much less. Do I want every card to be centered? Of course. I'd prefer centered over uncentered, but I don't just not buy an uncentered card just because sometimes you can get really good deals on those cards. And if the rest of my qualifications are met, then hey, that's just less money that I have to spend. So as a hobby, I think as an industry, more like a hobby. As the hobby goes, we tend to get our panties in a wad about things that are out of our control. You can't control it, whether or not PSA changes their standards. You can choose to, submit to whoever you want. Actually, not as much as you used to. PSA and SGC are essentially the same, and you got CGC. Those are in Beckett, but really there's one game in town, PSA, SGC, truly. CGC is working their way there, but I think they got a long way to go, especially in the vintage world of earning respect and earning business. So, but you don't have to grade at all. You can buy raw or collect raw. Nothing wrong with that at all. But the way I like to collect, I'm stuck with the system and the hand that has been dealt to me. And therefore I will just go, okay. And someone would say, well, that's a cop-out. You should stand up and, hold out and don't do. Well, then I'm not collecting, and that's not okay. I'm not okay with that. So I know I'm going to get some interesting comments for this, but I just don't care. I don't care if they change their standards. I feel it's fascinating to watch, like the guy that sent all the vintage cards in and higher grades and got lower grades and all that. I feel bad for the guy. Probably should have kept him in the slabs they were in. And it is what it is. I can't help when the card was graded, and I can't help what the standards were when it was graded. And therefore I'm not gonna not buy an 8 from a long time ago that should be a 5 because I have some, moral high ground that I'm standing on. That's ridiculous. If I can buy that 8. Now, What I do think will happen is there will be an adjustment. That 8 won't be worth what a new 8 is worth. If you took an 8 that was graded yesterday and an 8 that was graded 10 years ago, I think you will start seeing more and more disparity in the prices of those cards. Because this isn't, I'm not breaking any news here. This is all stuff that's known. It's how quickly is it assimilated and integrated into the secondary card market. And I think that just takes time. I think there will be stubborn dealers that say, well, PSA says it's an 8, so this 8 that was graded a long time ago should be worth the same as an 8 graded yesterday. And I do think collectors will ultimately say, no, it's really not, or it shouldn't be. And again, you can decide how you deal with dealers, negotiate with dealers, but you could say, look, this wouldn't get an 8 today. You know it. I know it. Let's agree on a price that's more reasonable for the technical grade that it would get today. Or the old, I dare you to send it back in. Tell that to a dealer and see how that goes. Not very well, I would think. So I worry about things I can correct and fix and really affect. And I'm not going to let something like this affect how I hobby. I'm going to still buy PSA graded cards. I'm going to still submit to them and accept the lower grades that I will undoubtedly receive because they have changed their standards, and that is what it is. Enough about that. Please comment below. Write down everything you're thinking. Curse me out if you think, agree with me if you think, all of which are appropriate responses depending on where you land on this and what side of the fence you're on it. I do have a couple of cards that I've gotten in that I didn't want to show you, and they're kind of fun. So hang on one second and we'll get to that. All right, here we go. A couple of cards, and I did get my PSA magazine this month. I look every month to see if I get a variant cover, and I never do. I always get the base cover. But this year, this month, there's 3 bases. There's Larry, Magic, and Dr. J, and then you got some variant covers. So a couple of former Mavericks here, Jalen Brunson and Luka Doncic. So does anybody ever use the price guide in this thing? What's the point? Seriously. It's so obsolete the day they print it. But lots of basketball stuff in here. Oh, there's some baseball. So I'll go read. I actually like at least thumbing through it and see if there's anything that's interesting. So there's that. And the 2 cards I got. I am way more diligently now going after Pete Rose cards since the ban has been lifted. We will see if he gets in. I'm still 50-50. Like, I don't know. Do I think he deserves to get in? Of course. But do I think they'll put him in? I don't know. There's a lot of animosity there. But this is 87. This is his last playing days card, and I love it because on the back you've got all the stats and all the italics and all the diamonds and all the different things that Topps used to do. But last playing days card. He does have a card in 88 as a manager, and then I got this one. It's 89 Topps manager card. Little did we know that once this card was issued back in, February of 89, that by August 24th, 1989, Pete Rose would be banned from baseball for life by Bart Giamatti. For life. And his life is now over. So we will see if he gets in the Hall of Fame, but this is his last card, period. Last playing days card, last card, period. So still working on the Pete Rose run. These are cheap. I mean, these are PSA 8s, so they've come back down to normal. These are like $10, $15. So that's it for today, guys. Hope you have a good one. Let me know what you think down below. Keep collecting.